So the content wars are now the wars within the gaming industry. I know the console wars were it for many generations, but those days are essentially over at this point, and I get it. Xbox lost the console wars, so I'm sure you'll see a lot of people saying, I only think this because they lost the console wars. But the reality is, if you've been following the industry for the last number of years, particularly from about, I would say 2017 onwards, there are many hints as to where the future of this industry was going, especially when Xbox Game Pass was announced with the Xbox Play Anywhere features that they had started putting out there. And then throughout this generation, we've seen PC become one of the most prominent places and one of the most important places for games to land. And it's all because the content is really what matters. It's the content that is king. And if you're Xbox or your PlayStation, you want to have your games in as many places as possible. PlayStation has slowly been going in that direction to releasing games on PC. They're going to be releasing games day and date on PC. I mean, they already have. I mean, they have Helldivers 2, which was published day and date on PC. The upcoming Fair Games is going to be day and date on PC. All of Bungie's catalog, which are first-party PlayStation games, day and date on PC. And I think we will get even more than that eventually, where you'll start seeing, for example, maybe even like the next God of War or something that will be launching on PC day and date. We've also seen Square Enix, who have come out and just blatantly said we can't do deals with PlayStation anymore because it's just not good enough for them. They need to have their games in more places, and they've been doing that now. And the future Final Fantasy games are going to be landing everywhere. So we are definitely in the platform/content wars of video games, and who is going to be the winner of that? Well, we don't know yet, but I would say Xbox right now has set themselves up to be the winners as being the biggest publisher and the amount of IPs that they do have to be able to sustain something like Xbox Game Pass and keep people wanting to be subscribed at the same time being able to sell their games at full price on all of the other platforms. Now, the Xbox creator Seamus Blackley weighed in on this, and he has some interesting thoughts here on consoles, the power narrative that really doesn't matter anymore, and now being in the era of content and the console content war. So here is an article from Video Gamer, and it says Xbox creator Seamus Blackley believes modern Xbox's narrative around being more powerful is not helpful today as gaming technology plateaus. And just from that headline alone, I do agree with the statement that technology is plateauing. We are absolutely at that point of diminishing returns where you're not seeing a huge jump between generation to generation, between console to console. It's not like it used to be going from something like the Super Nintendo to the N64 or the PS2 to the PS3. We're nowhere in that realm anymore. Now, specifically, if you take a look at what Xbox did this generation, they were hoping that marketing the Series X as the most powerful console was going to be a big differentiator, and it just was not. The PS5 won the console wars absolutely on that, and nobody really cared about that big power difference, or at least a lot of people, I should say, didn't care. And the reality is, most third-party games are identical across both platforms. Yes, people nitpick and they look at a couple frames per second here, or they zoom in on a couple of pixels and show that one console does it better than the other. But the reality is most games run essentially the exact same. Seamus Blackley claims the narrative of having the most powerful console doesn't really work anymore. And he spoke up here on the Video Gamer podcast explaining that marketing around being the most powerful machine available is becoming old-fashioned, and the original Xbox was a powerhouse for its time, being the only console with a built-in hard drive, the only console capable of using pixel shaders, and the only console with the power to run games like Morrowind, Knights of the Old Republic, Chronicles of Riddick, and Halo. And the OG Xbox, I think back to it, and those are some things that definitely set it apart. I mean, the hard drive for me is probably the thing that was the biggest differentiating factor comparatively to like the PS2, where you had to buy all of these memory cards. And the power itself, I remember it being marketed as being just a powerhouse. I had every platform back then, but I can't even think back to the PS2 versus the Xbox and the GameCube and think, did I really notice any difference between those three consoles when playing any games, any third-party games specifically? And I can't really pinpoint major differences between them. But the Xbox itself was marketed for a lot of things that differentiated it. And obviously back then, games like Morrowind and Halo that were exclusive to the OG Xbox were big sellers. That I would say Halo probably more so than anything. Goes on here and continues to say, being the most powerful back then was important for a console arriving after the explosion of the PlayStation 2 because it works, saying it was just that was a story that really worked and that was relevant then because we were still sort of at the nascent stages of graphics. Taking that hit in the cost of goods of the cogs was critical, both from the standpoint of story and positioning of us versus the other consoles that came from, what was perceived as these giant Japanese hardware companies that were obviously producing these things for no cost and making all of this profit of them. We were a Western company and we were saying, okay, we're going to lose money on these to make them super powerful and take a bet on the games being awesome. And we kind of aren't there. Well, we aren't there anymore. You think about the PS5 and the Xbox this generation. They both came out relatively the same power. They weren't making a ton of money off of each console. So the Nintendo Switch, on the other hand, are still kind of doing what they did back in the day. Like if you look at the Switch, they made a lot more profit on the sales of the Switch. And I'm assuming with the Switch too, because this thing is going to be far less powerful than even the current gen consoles, which are at this point, when you compare it to PC, are becoming more and more outdated by the day. The Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be so underpowered, but it's still going to sell so much that they will make a ton of profit off of each unit sold. So they are in like a different realm. They still have that old strategy, whereas PlayStation is always as well trying to up the technology in their console and the power and stuff. So they can't really just focus on selling as many consoles as possible and hoping that they make a bunch of profit off that. People buy a PlayStation 5 and they play Call of Duty the entire time. It's not doing that much for them, especially now with it basically funding their biggest competitor in Xbox. And it's going to continue with the platform wars and the content wars. It's still going to be Xbox versus PlayStation going forward. Who is putting out the better games? Who is putting out more games and making more money and things like that? Whereas previously it was just looking at the console. Now he goes on here and he talks a little bit more about 2001 and the games that massively evolving in graphics and everything, saying here, being the most powerful was also important to get the guys going into the future. And then, how they manage that brand and the story going forward is not my effing fault. And it's not, I would not have done things the same. I don't know if it would have been more or less successful, but I certainly think that this narrative around being more powerful is not helpful today. And now we are in the battle for the content, specifically Seamus Blackley here saying, I remember seeing like Gran Turismo when it came out for PlayStation and I had to buy it just because I couldn't believe what was happening on the screen, right? And that was compelling. And that doesn't exist anymore. Like there's no more graphics that make you feel that way. And I absolutely agree. I've talked about this on this channel so many times. I remember walking into here in Canada, we had Future Shop before it was Best Buy, but I remember walking in and they had the Xbox 360 kiosks set up, and the main game that they were showing off to just show the craziness of the graphics going from the OG Xbox to the Xbox 360 was Fight Night, where you could see like the sweat, you could see the knockouts and the skin ripple and everything. It was mind blowing. I still remember walking in and seeing that. Now, it just doesn't happen. Like if you were to walk in and you saw a good looking Xbox One or PS4 game, and then you saw a Series X or a PS5 or a PS5 Pro game right beside it, you would say, yeah, there's a difference. These games look better, but I don't think most people would just, their minds would be blown from the difference between the two generations. And we are at that point. We'll never have that again. For new people coming into gaming who didn't experience those older generations and the actual major jumps we did get, go back and just compare some of those graphics, because you will see right now it's like we get better frame rates, which is good, better lighting, better ray tracing, and basically just some sharper images with these games. The games look phenomenal, but it isn't just a massive jump here that we did used to see. So when it comes to the graphics thing, we'll never get back to that, which is sad. But at the same time, they have to keep these consoles affordable for people to be able to go out and buy them. The only thing I could see happening in this next upcoming generation is if, specifically on the Xbox side of things, if they're going to change the way that they do their home console and they potentially license out the Xbox OS to other manufacturers, I could see Xbox just coming out here with their own console that is very expensive and very premium for the people that want the highest end, and then say, here are your other options if you want the lower end SKUs, if you only want to spend $300 or $350 or $400 rather than $800, $700 or something to get into the console market. That's the only thing I could see potentially happening. But if they don't do that, then I don't think we'll see just, again, a massive leap from Series X to whatever is going to be coming out next. Now, he continues on here, talks about the battle for content and how it's switched away from the sort of technical achievements into other things. It says, and I think if you want to win, you have to find those other things that they're compelling to people, right? You have to create an experience where people, when they see it, they have to have it, because what you're really doing is you're sort of like trying to suck a huge grape through a straw. You're trying to get them to spend several $100s to buy a games console in order to play a $70 game, which, will those prices increase? There's a lot of instability right now. I mean, GTA 6 could come out and increase prices. We don't know. That would make things even worse than it currently is for the pricing. And then that value proposition goes down, I think, for a lot of people. He goes, proof is in the pudding. As a lifelong gamer, the Xbox creator thinks back to his Nintendo Switch, a 2017 handheld powered by an underclocked 2013 hardware that simply has the content it needs to not only survive, but become one of the best-selling consoles of all time. And I mean, I agree. That is the thing here. You take a look at the Nintendo Switch. It is a perfect example as to why power just simply does not matter. If you have a console that has, well, one, great features to it, because the portability thing was huge for the Nintendo Switch, and then two, you're able to put great games on it and great content, the power of the thing just will not make a difference. So going forward to next generation, it'll be interesting to see how Xbox does handle the whole narrative, because we've already seen Sarah Bond come out and say the next generation is going to be the biggest technical leap that we have ever seen. So I wonder what they're going to sell it on. I mean, we've already pretty much been told by Phil Spencer, but they're going to sell it on the features of it. They're going to sell it, I think, on things like the AI upscaling, the PSSR Xbox version, whatever that they are going to have in their console, to show that you can keep frame rates steady, 60 frames per second. It can look up to 4K or upscale up to 4K. All of that stuff, I think, is going to be the major thing that they do try to sell. And then on top of that, it's going to be, I believe, backwards compatibility features showing that you can play all your older games and they're going to look better on this new console versus on the Xbox Series X and S. So just an interesting thing here. Seamus Blackley, I think, stating the obvious that a lot of people still don't want to recognize, I would say, is that the console wars are done. The console wars are absolutely over. We are moving on here to the content and platform wars, if there is any war anymore between these companies. They're all just kind of moving along with the way that the industry, they believe, is going to be going. And whoever is set up best for the games, the content, is going to end up being the winners, particularly between Xbox and PlayStation. Nintendo is still kind of doing their own thing, as they're going to be releasing, again, a Switch 2 with much lower antiquated hardware comparatively to what is going to be coming out on the market over the next number of years. But on the video there, guys, if you did enjoy this video, hit that thumbs up. If you're new here, hit that subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.